It's finally time to start firing up the grill. From city to shore, Acme is everything you need to prep for this summer season. Download the Acme app to shop for this season's essentials any way you want. Open the Acme app, clip your deals, then order your items online. An experienced Acme associate will carefully select your groceries, bag your order, and bring it right to your car or deliver right to your door. Download the app or visit acmemarkets.com for program details.
Hi there, I am Adam Kirbas. This is our 5th episode in this podcast about my life and how I came to be who I am, or as my pathway to an artist. However, this episode today is somehow special in that case because it is Father's Day. And I wasn't actually quite sure whether I wanna or should talk about my father as well as my parents in general. My parents died, both of them in a car accident in 2012. So remembering them is still very or their loss. Remembering their loss is still very painful. Nevertheless, I think my parents, they need to be reminded. Of course, they are always in my mind. I keep thinking of them almost daily, actually. And of course, future generations will never come to know them, and they all have to entrust our perception, our stories of them. But it is as well as for myself, for to commemorate the people who brought me up, and they brought me up the best, the way they know best. They taught me a lot of things, and my parents, they were really vital for me, for how I perceive the world, my moral values, and later on what I consider to be worth fighting for, and to differentiate one for which my heart is pondering. I mean, I've talked about this before. I will just repeat it. I want everyone. I will try to give an intro of my parents' life, especially my father. It is Father's Day. I mean, my mother. I will on Mother's Day. I did not talk much about my mother. It is not that I would not love her. No, it is. I indeed love both my parents. I still love them, but and I will then later on dedicate one episode to my mother. However, but since my parents died in a tragical car accident at the same time, of course, I always keep their memories equally or revere them equally. Or like I said before, my father was born in Turkey in 1960. We are actually of Armenian descent. The family of both the family of my mother as well as the family of my father. We are of Armenian descent. We have Armenian blood in our veins, and this was partially responsible for some occurrences later on, which I will only talk about briefly, but which in a way were vital for me to take some actions. However, my father was born in Turkey in 1960 in May, and he grew up very poor. I mean, you have to know this was Turkey. Turkey was struggling in this time. It was a civil unrest. I mean, those who know the history of Turkey was that Turkey at this time was at the brink of a civil war. My father was born in Ordu. This is a provincial area, so it is a province which is called Ordu, and its capital was called Ordu in the past. Now they have changed its name. This is very common in Turkey, that names are being changed. Now it's called Altın Ordu. However, it is in the Black Sea region, and uh, both of my parents are from this region, and my father grew up there. He grew up in a big family, and they had, of course, struggling. They were struggling to make ends meet. They were farmers. Both of my parents both of my parents' families were farmers here in Ordu, and they were struggling to make ends meet, especially the family of my father. I mean, one of the reasons was that they had too many children. However, and then my father managed successfully to go to Austria in the 70s. I mean, this was my grandmother was the first one who could manage to come to Turkey, and my father was in his 50s. He was a teen. My father always used to say he went to Austria without even having shaven himself before. So he was 14, 15. He went to Austria. He did not went to school, though. In general, my father had only basic education. He only went 5 years to school. This was some sort of a plateau school, provincial school. This was not much. I mean, he could barely read and write. I mean, he could understand, of course, but it was, of course, different. I mean, you have to be aware in Turkey during that age. Major reforms would always be in the cities, so Kemalism, or those so-called leftist modernization of the country would mainly play in the cities, and this was mostly confined to a small elite, and which then later on, I mean, if you wanna understand the rise of the AKP and why Erdogan rose, then you have to understand what went wrong in this modernization processes. However, I don't wanna go into it. And my parents. My father managed to come to Austria. This was in the 70s, and my father he talked a little bit about how life was in Austria. He went to Zell am See. This is again a very provincial area, and he went there because it was very similar to the condition, the landscape, the mountains. In Ordu. Ordu is green, so some of you may assume that Turkey is all desert, and so on. No, not at all. Or steppe, Anatolia steppe, but the Black Sea region is actually pretty much green, lush green. And my father always decided, or his parents decided for Zell am See. This is a rural area in the land of Salzburg. In Salzburg, it is in the west of Austria, Zell am See, and they decided to settle down there because it is somehow equal to Ordu, where they some sort of had their family, or could connect to the landscape. And this was the reason why he went there. And later, when he married my mother, he would live there, and I was born there. We grew up there, and my father, of course, I mean, my father worked in an assembly line. This was some sort of a sawmill. He worked there his entire life. He worked in Austria before his death. Before I think about 30 to 40 years, I don't know exactly, but he spent most of his life in Austria. He didn't speak very properly German, though this was partially had to do with the how foreigners were perceived. I talked about this Gastarbeiter, so people did not very much care about integration because everyone assumed they would go back eventually. My father too thought he would go back to Turkey eventually. My both of my parents did. This is the reason why they invested money in building a home, not in Austria but in Turkey. However, my father worked in assembly line. This is pretty much doing the same movements throughout the day. My mother was a cleaning woman. I mean, it is always difficult to talk or to talk about one's parents. I mean, especially if they are gone. Everyone loves their parents, and you somehow notice this after they are gone. This was sadly enough, but of course, I know, of course, that my parents were not perfect. I mean, who is that? But when I remember my father and my parents, as well as my mother, they wanted always the best for us. They always said, "Yeah, you have to save yourself." This is a very common term in the migrant community, especially in the Turkish migrant community, to save yourself. This means actually that you accomplish something, and so that you, in a way, save yourself. My parents wanted us to learn a job. My father wanted me to be a mechanic. I remembered there was even a job. I mean, I even had found a job, an employee who wanted to make me a mechanic, who wanted to take me in as an apprentice for a mechanic. But then I lied. I wanted to go to school, and we all know how this all worked out for me. Nevertheless, but my parents, they indeed wanted us to study. I mean, I have two siblings. I have one older brother who became a transsexual, and one younger sister, and they wanted us to accomplish something. I mean, this is a big deal to enable all of your three children to go to university. I mean, back then when we thought university is a good thing. Nevertheless, despite the fact that in Austria you have support, you to go to university. I mean, I never came to pay any amount of tuition fees. So this is, you are summer free in Austria. I mean, this is, I don't want to talk about this now, tuition free, but in Austria you have to do this because the population has only 8 million, and if you compare Austria to America, you know why they can't introduce tuition fee. However, in Austria, this was, and it was not easy. Being a migrant, and you have to be aware, my parents, they were not, they did not have the chance. I mean, this is what you have to say. They did not have had the chance to go to school because in Turkey, school is expensive. You have to pay for this in Turkey. There is indeed tuition fees there, and it is not easy to go there. And yet my mother actually was the one who really pushed us, who really wanted us to give everything, despite the fact they could not much help us. I mean, if we had problems in school, for example, in German, I mean, if you were struggling in German, you could not ask anyone. This was, I remember some Austrian parents would always correct their students' essays when they would write it for school, or their home assignments. With us, this was not possible, or in our family, this was not possible. I mean, and yet, nevertheless, my mother encouraged us always to seek for more, to really get all of it. I mean, don't get me wrong. I did follow her advice, but very late, it needed, or I needed time to mature, to grow up, to really understand why education is important. I back then when I thought I was too cool to go to school. However, my father was actually a very introvert. He was not what you might expect. I mean, of course, there are prejudices against Middle Eastern men, against Turkish men, but my father was actually a very introverted. He would not share much. I mean, and this was somehow, in a way, the sad thing. I mean, of course, he would be working all day long. I mean, my father was doing overtime. He had to enable his three children to go to school as well as build a future in Turkey because no one knew. This is what many people don't know, and I haven't talked about it. But back in the days, you had some sort of a fear that you are being deported because you could be deported. In Austria, no matter how long have you been there, even though if you're legal, so we were all legal there, you could be deported any time, and there were of course within the migrant community some sort of fierce threat. Yeah, it is only a matter of time until a far right party comes along and then they start deporting us because my parents my witnessed something like this. This was in the 80s. In the 80s, my father talked about this briefly, that people started deporting any foreigner who was unemployed. And in Austria, if you wanted to avoid or if you want to avoid deportation, you had to have a job. So without a job application, they could easily deport you. And even I could have been deported before I got the Austrian citizenship. So it doesn't matter. So in Austria, you do not get the citizenship because even if you're born in Austria. So I had to apply for the citizenship. However, my father was actually a funny guy, and but we didn't know about it very much because he was always working. In my youth, I only saw him on the weekends, and he was mostly sleeping. He was hard working. I mean, this is I sometimes helped him. I sometimes worked with him, and you could really see that he's somehow he loves to work. It was this working ethics which made him I think unique. He was some sort of restless, always on a move. I mean, I saw him once working. I saw him. He sometimes took me with me, and you could somehow see this. I mean, of course, you have to be aware that if you work in an assembly line, that the air machine in a way does not leave you does not leave you alone in a way, or that you always are occupied. So you don't have much time to just do nothing. This is actually not that bad as it sounds, because in this way time goes by faster, because if you do the same kind of movements day in, day out for 8 hours, or if you work overtime for 10, 12 hours, then it is pretty much tough because time does not pass by and then you go nuts. This is partially what happened to me. I mean, if you work in an assembly line, the worst thing someone can do is put a watch in front of you, because no one would wear a watch, because who is that nuts? Because this would drive you crazy. However, my father was not. I mean, there are, of course, like I said, prejudices against Middle Eastern men, that Middle Eastern men don't know, for example, how to cook. This of course, this is not true. And there are some sort of this was after 9/11. After 9/11, the so-called feminism. This is nothing else as prejudice disguised as feminism. They try to find a scapegoat for why all these young folks from the Middle East, why they are radicalized and so on. I mean, no one really took interest in the failed integration. It is always about uh, seeking for scapegoats. However, my father knew how to cook because he lived he lived a single life, and my father would wash the dishes and would even do the laundry. And I even remember that Austrian women, and this is really interesting, that Austrian women would would laugh at my father when they would see him hang out the laundry or do the dishes, because they themselves or among their family it was actually very uncommon that men do this kind of work. So it is not so. It is not so that that Middle Eastern men, that there would be all pashas, and that they would not only be bad role models for their boys and so on. So this was not the case. We actually really saw our father helping in the kitchen, and and this was for us very natural. So it was nothing. I think. I mean, I cook myself. I like cooking, and I don't think that as a man that you should not cook, or that cooking would be feminine, or doing the dishes, doing the laundry or something. I mean, this is all a lot of prejudice. However, but my parents, of course, they lived their lives how they knew best. You have to be aware they came from a special ground. And then if you're an Austrian, if you are a migrant in Austria, then you, of course, apply your knowledge of life you had in Turkey as a farmer, as a poor farmer. And then, of course, you get experiences as being a foreigner. You come to Austria, you do not know the language. German is one of the more difficult languages there. And then, of course, no one really cared about you. My father told me he came to Austria, and 2 days thereafter he had already a job, and he went working, and this was all it. And in work, and in its workplace, there were Turkish migrants too, and the state didn't much care whether you learn German and so on. So this entire integration, this was different back then. I mean, now everyone talks about, yeah, we have to teach our migrants the proper language, but this is something you could have made back then. I mean, my father had of course his character traits, or some specifically character traits. When I mean, he was an overthinker. He used to think all by himself for hours. I think this is one trait I inherited from him, and he would always think the best of people. I mean, some called him naive. He would be gullible to any kind of deceit. I mean, of course, if you are surrounded by crooks and deceptive people, they will take advantage of you. But this is not an issue where someone is gullible, rather about the moral stand of a society, and there is indeed some issues here. But I really admired my father for one thing, and this was despite of his poverty, and despite of that, he was always down to earth. I mean, this is, everyone always thought, because he was so introverted. My father, because he was so introverted, everyone thought, he's he's not very smart, he's not wits, he's not very or he's very gullible. But it was rather that he was somehow too he thought too much of other people. I mean, of course, it was later called as weakness, as weakness, but never. This is somehow it is difficult to explain this, but it was not weakness. I mean, if you really listened to him, and this is, I mean, here there's of course he had not much friends. If you're introverted, if you're close to the world, I mean, you don't have much friends. However, but if you really listen to him, and if you will, and if he would open up to you, it was really remarkable. I mean, he could his observations. I mean, this were great, and he was, of course, this is what I heard, a great love. Um, love. He would used to write a lot of love letters. I mean, I don't know. Uh, I've never read one of them. I only read some of his diary entries. There was not much of it, and this is really a pity. But he used to uh, sing. I mean, he would love to sing, and he would just sing about, uh, sing along. He would just make up some melodies, and he would sing. I mean, he was, in a way, you did not learn much of it because of this work, because of this thing, and so of course it is a big question mark. I mean, how would his life would have been, and so on. And but nevertheless, I will always see him as positive, and I happened to learn him. It was just very such a pity that he did not open up. I mean, he was somewhat of, yeah, and of course it would have been easier for everyone if he would have just opened up, if he would have set his mind. I mean, because there were some issues with his own family as well, which were just, to say it mildly, not okay, and he should have said something, and this would have been way more different if he had. But he had this good nature. I mean, he believed in his family and his siblings, and he wouldn't know better. And then, of course, the thing that changed everything, and this was, of course, their death in 2012. This was a car accident. To this very day, there were some dubious things going on, and while I don't want to go too much in this, but uh, the moment I heard about this, I couldn't believe it. I know that some people may not understand this, or will assume that this is just a phrase. No, I could not believe it because then I was in Vienna. I was a student. This was my freshman year. This were I had started very late in university. This was my freshman year, and then my sister called me. I remember it was on a Sunday that both my parents died in a car accident in Zell am See. It was winter, and in winter the roads are frosty. My father was actually a very careful driver, and yeah, something happened there, and the car slid. My father lost control, and the car and another car hit them, and this is how they passed away. I mean, it was difficult for me. I mean, I couldn't believe it. No one could believe that, and my father, of course, for me it was difficult, and of course different, and then entire this Muslim funeral, because in the Muslim funeral, or in an Islamic funeral, death the death is being washed. So I washed the dead body of my father. It was a very crushing for me to hold the dead hand of my father while I was washing him. This was some sort of his, before he's being put into a coffin, he's being washed, and it was really, well, I don't know what to say, but it is a very, very cold procedure. But nevertheless, I mean, I held this hand. I held this hand, which saved me. Which which could do something unbelievable. I mean, and there he lied. I think this is someone you cannot describe this. This was this was soul crushing to see this, to see him and how this happened. I mean, no one could have believed this. I mean, I would have never believed it. I thought I thought no, I didn't know what to say actually anymore. And my parents died. They died without ever knowing that those people for whom they cared the most, that they were actually secretly and surreptitiously conspiring against them. It was, I don't know, it was all such devastating at once, and then later on what happened thereafter. Uh, I mean, what happens? What happens when you lose your parents? And well, you lose your connection. I mean, this is the most important thing. You lose your connection to the world. You lose your connection to the past. This is your family. This was where you belong to. I mean, when I went to Vienna, I mean, I wanted to leave. I was the stupid young boy who thought he had to go to Vienna to see the world. I mean, Vienna is not the world, not even far from it. Vienna is a filthy ditch. It is a shithole. However, but then yet I always thought, no matter what, I can always go back. Now, you have some sort of a safety net. I mean, this is what you feel with your parents, some safety net. You say, if I fail, no matter what, I can always go to them. There's always my mother said always before she died, she called me and she wanted me to come home. She said, no, don't go to Vienna. I mean, if I had only listened to her, and she called me. She wanted me to come back, and yeah, this was some sort of a connection, and you have some sort of a more self assurance. It gives you more self esteem. You that, and of course there's someone who cares for you. I mean, this is your parents. I mean, you cannot supplement parental love, because your parents, they love you unconditionally. Everyone who knows that. I mean, this is why it's so rare to find people who love you just the way you are. And this is parental love, and this was lost in a way, and thereafter you walk to earth in a way very insecurely. This is actually what really changed, that you were never sure about it. You knew, but if you fail in your life, I mean, to this very day, actually, I think this, because I'm still struggling to make ends meet, and even to this very day, you say to yourself, I mean, this is your last chance. I mean, if I fail, I have nothing. I land on the streets. I'm done for good, and it's not for lack of trying. However, and this is actually what changed. And then you somehow start to appreciate your parents, because I always had this fear of inferiority of them. I mean, this fear of inferiority meant that in Austria, especially, I can only talk about Austria and partially of Germany, that you somehow, if you grow up in this system in Austria, you are not only a foreigner, but you always look at yourself, your own culture, through the lens of this of the host culture, and it is always negative. It is been always considered as inferior as your culture, your Turkish culture. This is how you have how I have perceived it. I mean, it was not only my own perception; it was pretty much straightforward and out in the open that where we come from, that our culture, that this is inferior, that this is uh, beneath this high civilized German culture, and you kind of look with this at your own culture, at your parents, and at yourself as well. You somehow adapt to this lens. You adopt their views, and you look at yourself and your culture in some sort of in a demeaning way. And this is what I partially looked at my parents. I thought, these are nothing else than poor people from Turkey. What do they know about life? I mean, well, actually, they knew a lot. They knew a lot, and and this is some sort of so much with sorrow. I felt so much sorrow because I saw my parents from this point, mm, or that I cared about what people thought about me. I mean, who cares what these people think about you? But back then I was young. For example, I distanced myself emotionally from my mother because some people in school said about me that I would be a mama's boy, a mommy's boy, and so on. I mean, this is all what you then later appreciate. I mean, so, because some people say you are a mommy's boy, then you stop, somehow being emotionally close to your mother anymore. I mean, I felt great sorrow for us. I mean, my parents, they did the best they can. Of course, they 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 want they had no plans for us. They they wanted to live in Turkey, go back in their retirement. They build a life in Turkey and not in Austria. I mean, it is of course very difficult to build a life in Austria when the host society mostly just despises you in a way or another, or just does not see you as an equal. Of course, you have to understand this as well, that it is then difficult to somehow approach this society. But I think it took me a while when I understood via sociology and so on, that my parents, they saw the world from their perspective, and it was remarkable. I mean, they enabled their children to 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 do great, and everything I accomplished in my life, I owe it to these two wonderful people, because my parents, this is what people don't know, but if in a way, if you're a worker, and so on, my parents, for example, taught me not only their working ethics, but as well as that you always be some sort of a realistic what you can accomplish. Of course, if you're a migrant, then sadly enough, you're too realistic in a way. You are some sort of a too pessimistic with your accomplishments. I mean, my parents would have never thought that a migrant boy from Turkey, from their hometown, could ever attend a university in Europe, and so there were a lot of things they did not recognize. They did not know about it. I mean, of course, when you have only went your life 5 years to school, what do you know about school? I mean, and so on. And then of course, what happened thereafter, and this is what made me think many times, and I really went sleepless about this. I mean, then if you walk through shattered tombstones. If you, and of course, I was mad about this, and I swore myself back then I would never forget this, and I haven't to this very day. I have never forget this, and I will never forget this, and to this cowardly attack on the grave of people. This was just despicable. This was right at the moment, and and uh, and 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 if you think that you are, and if you're a Said, if you are Saids are descendants of the Prophet Muhammad, if you think that you are above the law and that you can do something like that, well, you are wrong. Well, you are wrong, and I did never forget this, and I will never forget this. And I swore myself that I would teach these people that they are not above the law, that this is a human law, this is indecency, this is despicable. That what happened there with those gravestones. I mean, you are not even Turkish, you are from Azerbaijan or whatever, for whatever the ditch hole you crawl out of. And I was mad, of course. I mean, who are you? I mean, who are you just to come along and smash and destroy the gravestone of innocent people? Yeah, yet, I mean, these are cowards. They know how to be man enough to hurt gravestone and little children, but they are not man enough to face other men. And it was hurtful. I mean, I was incensed. I'm still mad. I mean, this is something you cannot forget. This is the earth of my ancestors, my father's family, as well as my mother's. They were Armenians. This is not that they were just here for a couple of years. They worked this soil for their entire life. They were decent, honorable people. They worked for their life. They did not deceive other people like these people do. So they did not try to hurt innocent people. They did not. My parents worked for their lives. They did not leave anything to chance. They did not think of themselves as something better. That they would stay above the law. This is what they taught us, that we have to down to earth, no matter who you are, no matter who you think you are, because in the end you are nothing else than human. This is what these sites do not get. Who the whatever. However, and I think my parents did a great job. I mean, because their lives was remarkable. Their life was remarkable, and that's the reason why still to this very day people are struggling to emulate it. I mean, you have to work for your life and not be a deceptive and trying to screw over people. Yeah? Decency is something which is actually taught in the Quran, but some people, despite the fact that they are disciples of them, haven't quite figured that out yet. However, but it is, they are remarkable parents. I mean, of course, there are things I cannot talk about, and things which make them even more special. I mean, which is beyond comprehension. I mean, every child loves their parents. Everyone does, and I'm no exception. And I can only say, if they hear me, if they see me, hear me, I have tried to be just. I have tried to apply what they taught me. I have tried to do the best I can from all my abilities, and maybe I was wrong in some some instances, in some cases, but nevertheless, I try to be the best. And I want to say to my parents when they hear me in heaven, thank you very, very much. Thank you 1,000 times.
It's finally time to start firing up the grill. From city to shore, Acme is everything you need to prep for this summer season. Download the Acme app to shop for this season's essentials any way you want. Open the Acme app, clip your deals, then order your items online. An experienced Acme associate will carefully select your groceries, bag your order, and bring it right to your car or deliver right to your door. Download the app or visit acmemarkets.com for program details.